Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we are going to be tackling some pretty potent thought starters from Nassim Nicholas Taleb, specifically from his book, The Bed of Procrustes.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so you've given us a bunch of his aphorisms to unpack, and I am excited to see what we can glean from them. Are you ready to have your assumptions challenged? I know I am.
Yeah, always up for a good mental workout. And Taleb is definitely one of those thinkers who can really shake things up
Yeah.
and make you question everything you thought you knew.
That's what I love about him. He doesn't pull any punches. So let's start with the title, The Bed of Procrustes. What's the story there, and how does it relate to our thinking?
All right, so picture this. In ancient Greek mythology, Procrustes was this innkeeper, but with a seriously twisted sense of hospitality. He had this iron bed, and he would make every guest fit it, no matter what. Too tall, chop off their legs. Too short, stretch them out on a rack. Not exactly a five-star experience.
Yeah, I think I'd stick to Airbnb. But I see the metaphor here. Taleb's saying we kind of do this with ideas, right? We try to force things to fit our preconceived notions, instead of letting reality shape our thinking.
Precisely. We have these mental models, these categories that we've created to simplify the world, and sometimes we cling to them so tightly that we end up distorting reality to fit them, rather than the other way around.
It's like we're all carrying around these Procrustean beds in our heads, trying to make everything fit. One of the most striking examples from the book that really made me stop and think was Taleb's point about medicating school children to fit the curriculum, rather than adapting the curriculum to fit the children.
Right, that's such a powerful example of Procrustean thinking in action.
Yeah.
We're essentially trying to mold children into a predetermined mold
Yeah.
instead of recognizing their unique strengths and challenges. And it makes you wonder, where else are we doing this in society, in our workplaces, in our relationships, even in our own personal goals and aspirations?
It is a bit unnerving when you start to see it everywhere. So how do we combat this Procrustean tendency? How do we become more aware of those mental boxes that we're trapping ourselves and others in?
I think that's where Taleb's Counternarratives come in. He uses these sharp, often paradoxical aphorisms to challenge conventional wisdom and expose the flaws in our thinking. It's like he's taking a hammer to those mental Procrustean beds, trying to break them apart.
Yeah, he does it with such wit and precision. Let's dive into some of these counter-narratives. This one really struck me. The best revenge on a liar is to convince him that you believe what he said. It seems counterintuitive, but there's a deeper wisdom there, isn't there?
Absolutely. Think about it. When someone lies to you, they're trying to manipulate you, to gain power over you. But if you respond by acting as if you believe them, you completely disarm them. You're essentially taking away their power, their ability to control the narrative.
It's like you're playing a different game altogether. Instead of engaging in a power struggle, you're rising above it. There's almost a stoic element to it, not letting the liar dictate your emotional state.
Exactly. It's a way of maintaining your inner peace and equanimity, even in the face of dishonesty, and in the long run. Isn't that a more powerful form of revenge?
Totally. It reminds me of that saying, living well is the best revenge. Okay, here's another one that I know I've been guilty of. When we want to do something while unconsciously certain to fail, we seek advice so we can blame someone else for the failure. Ouch, that one hits close to home.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's such honesty in that observation. It forces us to confront our own ego and the ways in which we try to avoid responsibility for our actions. Sometimes we're not really seeking guidance, but rather a scapegoat.
It's like we're setting ourselves up for failure so we can have someone else to blame. It's a subtle form of self-sabotage. What's fascinating is that Taleb points this out, not just in individuals, but also in institutions and systems.
Yes. Think about all the times we've seen organizations, or even governments, seeking advice from consultants or experts, only to ignore it when it doesn't suit their agenda. It's a way of shifting blame and avoiding accountability.
This next one is particularly relevant in our success-obsessed culture. They will envy you for your success, for your wealth, for your intelligence, for your looks, for your status, but rarely for your wisdom. It's like he's pointing out this fundamental flaw in how we measure worth.
It's a powerful critique of our societal values. We tend to admire and envy those who achieve external markers of success, while overlooking the deeper qualities of character and wisdom that truly
We
matters.
prioritize the visible, the tangible, the quantifiable. But what about the things that can't be measured so easily? The integrity, the compassion, the resilience.
Those qualities often go unnoticed or undervalued, but they're the ones that ultimately make us better human beings. And they're the ones that lead to true fulfillment and lasting happiness.
So how do we shift our focus? How do we start valuing wisdom and character as much as, if not more than, outward achievement?
I think it starts with recognizing the limitations of our current value system. We need to question our assumptions about what constitutes success and happiness, and we need to start valuing those who embody wisdom and character, even if they don't fit the conventional mold of success.
Taleb certainly embodies that unconventional spirit. He's not afraid to challenge the status quo and make people uncomfortable. And you know what? I think that's a good thing. It forces us to grow and evolve.
I completely agree. He's a reminder that true progress often comes from questioning our assumptions and embracing discomfort. It's in those moments of challenge that we truly learn and grow.
All right, I am ready to dive even deeper. Let's talk about Taleb's take on the sacred and the profane. This is where he gets really personal and reveals his own values and beliefs, right?
Exactly. He's not just talking about religious concepts here, but rather about what truly matters in life versus what's superficial and ultimately meaningless. He's drawing a distinction between what holds inherent value and what's merely a distraction.
He even has this personal practice that I always find amusing. After interacting with, and I'm quoting here, consultants, economists, Harvard Business School professors, journalists, and those in similarly depraved pursuits, he takes a ritual bath to cleanse himself.
It's such a Taleb move. He's using humor and satire to highlight the absurdity of blindly following what he sees as empty rhetoric and manufactured narratives. It's his way of resisting the influence of those who prioritize profit over principles.
He also observes that restaurants get you in with food to sell you liquor. Religions get you in with belief to sell you rules. He's basically saying there's often an ulterior motive behind seemingly benevolent offerings.
Yeah, it's a reminder to be discerning, to question authority, and to think for ourselves, to not take things at face value, but to look deeper and see what might be lurking beneath the surface.
It's about developing that critical thinking muscle and not just accepting what we're told. So let's bring this back to you. What do you consider sacred in your own life? What are those things that hold inherent value and meaning for you?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think we all need to ask ourselves. What are those things that we hold as untouchable, uncompromisable? What are our core values? And how do we protect them from the corrosive influences of the profane?
It's about identifying what truly matters to us and then living in a way that reflects those values. It's about making choices that align with our authentic selves, even if those choices go against the grain of conventional wisdom.
And sometimes that requires a certain amount of courage, a willingness to stand apart from the crowd.
You've got that right. And you know what? I think that's exactly the kind of challenge that Taleb would embrace. He'd be the first to encourage us to question the status quo and forge our own paths.
Speaking of forging our own paths, Taleb has this concept he calls the Ludic Fallacy that really sheds light on how we often misinterpret the world around us.
Okay, I've got to admit, Ludic Fallacy sounds a bit intimidating. What's that all about?
It's actually simpler than it sounds. Think of it this way. Imagine you're flipping a coin. In a purely theoretical game-like setting, the odds are always 50-50 heads or tails. That's the ludic part relating to games. But in real life, things aren't so neat and tidy. What if the coin is weighted? What if there's wind affecting the toss? The ludic fallacy is basically the mistake of assuming those clean, predictable rules of games always apply to the messy, unpredictable complexities of real life.
So it's like thinking you can perfectly predict the stock market based on historical data alone without accounting for those black swan events Taleb's famous for.
Exactly. You're getting it. We often try to simplify reality by imposing these artificial models and systems, but the world doesn't always play by our rules. Taleb uses a funny example to illustrate this. He talks about someone who hires a porter to carry their luggage at the airport, but then goes to the gym to lift weights. It's like, wait a minute, aren't you contradicting yourself?
That's hilarious. It's like our behavior is so context dependent. We might act rationally in one area of life, but totally abandon those same principles in another. It's like those people who meticulously track their calories, but then binge on junk food on the weekends.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes Taleb's observations so relatable. He's not afraid to poke fun at human nature, including his own. And sometimes the best way to expose a fallacy is to make you laugh at it.
He definitely has a knack for that. Remember this one. I suspect that IQ, SAT, and school grades are tests designed by nerds so they can get high scores in order to call each other intelligent.
It's funny because it's kind of true, right? We get so caught up in these systems of measurement, but are they really capturing the full picture of what it means to be intelligent?
That's the key question. We need to be critical of those metrics and systems and not let them define our worth or potential. And that brings us to another important concept from Taleb, subtractive knowledge.
Intriguing. I'm all ears. What's subtractive knowledge? Taleb argues that true knowledge often comes from subtracting what doesn't work, rather than just adding more and more information. It's about recognizing and eliminating errors, biases, and false patterns. In a world overflowing with information, knowing what to ignore is just as crucial as knowing what to pay attention to.
That's such a valuable insight, especially in today's world where we're bombarded with information from all sides. It's like we need to develop that mental decluttering muscle, right?
Yeah.
Learn to filter out the noise and focus on what truly matters.
Exactly. And it's not just about external information. It's also about questioning our own beliefs and assumptions,
Yeah.
identifying those mental models that might be holding us back. One of my favorite aphorisms from the book that speaks to this is, they think that intelligence is about noticing things that are relevant, detecting patterns. In a complex world, intelligence consists in ignoring things that are irrelevant,
Yeah.
avoiding false patterns.
Well, so it's not just about being smart, but also about being wise, knowing what to let go of. Have you had any experiences in your life where you've learned something valuable by subtracting, by recognizing what not to do?
Definitely. I used to think that being productive meant cramming my schedule with as many tasks as possible. But I realized that I was spreading myself too thin, and the quality of my work was suffering. I learned to be more selective, to focus on the things that truly mattered, and to say no to the rest. It was a process of subtraction, but it ultimately led to a greater sense of fulfillment and effectiveness.
It's like that saying, less is more. Sometimes we need to clear out the clutter to make room for what truly matters. It's about simplifying, prioritizing, and focusing on the essential.
Absolutely. And that takes discipline and courage, because it often means going against the grain of what society tells us we should be doing. It's about defining success on our own terms.
Okay, I'm ready for one last deep dive into Taleb's world. Let's talk about his perspective on ethics and what he calls the magnificent. This is where he really gets into the qualities that make for a truly exceptional human being, right?
Precisely. He outlines a set of virtues and characteristics that embody true strength and integrity. And it's not about what you'd typically expect. He challenges conventional notions of power and success.
So who are these magnificent people, according to Taleb? What makes them so special?
One of the key qualities is authenticity. They don't need to pretend or put on a show. They're comfortable in their own skin flaws. And all Taleb has this great aphorism that captures this perfectly. Those who have nothing to prove never say that they have nothing to prove.
That's so true. It's like those who are truly confident don't need to constantly boast or seek validation. Their actions speak for themselves.
Exactly. They're not driven by ego or the need for external approval. They operate from a place of inner strength and integrity.
He also says something really interesting about vulnerability. The weak shows his strength and hides his weaknesses. The magnificent exhibits his weaknesses like ornaments. It's like he's saying that true strength lies in embracing our imperfections.
Yes, it's about being comfortable with who we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress and that our imperfections are part of what makes us unique and interesting.
And then there's this rather provocative statement. Regular men are a certain varying number of meals away from lying, stealing, killing, or even working as forecasters for the Federal Reserve in Washington. Never the magnificent. He's really drawing a line in the sand here, isn't he?
He's highlighting the difference between those who are driven by self-preservation, by fear and scarcity, and those who operate from a higher ethical code. The magnificents are not swayed by external pressures or temptations. They stand firm in their principles, even when it's difficult.
So how do we cultivate those qualities of the magnificent in ourselves? How do we become more authentic, more courageous, more principled?
It starts with self-awareness, with recognizing our own strengths and weaknesses. And it requires a willingness to be vulnerable, to acknowledge our imperfections.
And to have the courage to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's unpopular or inconvenient.
Exactly. It's about living a life of integrity, a life that aligns with our values, even when it's hard.
It's about striving to be the best versions of ourselves, even if we never achieve some idealized notion of perfection.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's a journey, not a destination. We're all constantly learning and growing and evolving.
You know, it strikes me that so much of what Taleb talks about ties back to embracing uncertainty and developing that anti-fragile mindset that he's known for. It's not about trying to eliminate risk or control every outcome, but rather about building resilience, becoming stronger in the face of challenges.
Yes, he encourages us to not just withstand shocks and setbacks, but to actually benefit from them, to see them as opportunities for growth and learning. And that really resonates with me. especially in today's world, where things are changing so rapidly
Yeah.
and unpredictably.
It's about learning to surf those waves of uncertainty rather than getting swept under by them. It seems like so much of our traditional education, in our societal conditioning, teaches us to avoid risk and strive for stability. But Taleb seems to be saying that that's not how the world actually works.
Right. He argues that by trying to eliminate all risk, we often end up making ourselves more fragile in the long run. It's like building a house on a foundation of sand. The first strong wind comes along, and it all comes crashing down.
It's a powerful metaphor. So how do we build that anti-fragile mindset? How do we learn to embrace uncertainty and see it as a source of strength rather than something to be feared?
I think it starts with a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing uncertainty as a threat, we can start to see it as an opportunity for growth, for learning, for adventure. It's about embracing the unknown, knowing that we can't control everything, but we can control how we respond.
And that takes a certain amount of trust, doesn't it? Trust in ourselves, trust in the process, even trust in the universe.
Absolutely. It's about letting go of that illusion of control and surrendering to the flow of life. It's about accepting that there will be ups and downs, but that we have the inner strength to navigate them.
Which brings us back to Taleb's emphasis on wisdom and character. It's not just about being smart or successful in a conventional sense, but about developing those deeper qualities that allow us to thrive in the face of uncertainty.
Precisely. It's about cultivating those virtues of resilience, courage, humility, and adaptability. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle whatever life throws our way.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive into the world of Nassim Nicholas Taleb has been quite a ride. We've covered a lot of ground. From Procrustean thinking to counter-narratives, from the sacred and the profane to the Ludic Fallacy, from subtractive knowledge to the magnificent. It's been a whirlwind of thought-provoking insights.
It really has. It's amazing how much wisdom he packs into those seemingly simple aphorisms. Like each one is a little gem that you can turn over in your mind and discover new facets to.
And that's the beauty of his work. It's not just about giving you the answers, but about prompting you to ask better questions, to challenge your assumptions, to think critically, and to keep exploring. So as we wrap up today, we want to leave you with a challenge, inspired by Taleb's own aphoristic style.
All right, I like it.
Imagine you had to distill your own life philosophy, your own hard-earned wisdom, into a single, powerful sentence. What would your aphorism be? What insight or truth would you want to share with the world?
I love that.
Take some time to reflect on that. What are the key lessons that you've learned from your own experiences? What advice would you give to your younger self? What wisdom would you want to pass on to future generations?
What a great thought experiment.
And when you've crafted your aphorism, we'd love for you to share it with us. We're always eager to hear from our fellow deep divers and learn from your unique perspectives.
Always.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.